Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about this book. It is called Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey, and it's his autobiography. He turned 50, and this is all about his life experiences thus far. I will say this is an unbiased review. I'm not a huge Matthew McConaughey fan. In fact, the reason that I read this book is because it was on the bestseller list, and I like to keep abreast of books that are on that list and understand why they were popular. And so I was expecting this would be like a Hollywood tell-all with juicy secrets about himself and other people in the industry, but it actually was very refreshingly the opposite of that. If you've seen Matthew McConaughey's movies, especially when he plays the stereotype romantic comedy lead, you would think he's like this suave, big spender, kind of superficial person, but the book reveals that he's actually a very deeply introspective person and a man who writes poetry, and his poems are actually shared in this book, and he's kept journals for years, so you get to look at his journals as well as his poetry. So I thought that was really neat. He's actually a very creative person, a creative soul. It also has photos of himself when he's younger, and so forth. So I would say this book is easy to read. It's not too long. It's about 300 pages. It's a good, quick read. It keeps moving throughout his life. It's chronological, so from when he was younger to now. Some things that surprised me were his parents had a very abusive relationship. They physically fought with each other. His mother would leave for vacations at some periods, and he had two other brothers in the family as well, and they got married and divorced 3 times, I believe it was. There's a scene where they're like, his dad broke his mother's finger and put sprayed ketchup all over her. And despite that, though, he remarks that they had a loving relationship. So a little interesting there. And one thing that struck me is his dad physically also fought with his sons, but taught them that, like, to be a man, you have to be physically strong and, like, fight and stand up for yourself. So there's a part where he's a teenager and he stole a pizza from a restaurant, and he lied to his dad. And it wasn't that he had stolen the pizza, it was that he had lied to his dad, and his dad like beats him up, and he acknowledges that he feels like a coward. And I think later on, as you see him as a man and the things that he does that take a lot of courage, I don't know if that's where the courage comes from. I mean, I don't know if that's the best way to instill courage in children, but I see a pattern there of courage throughout his life. So if you're looking for a Hollywood tell-all with juicy details about his romantic life or other celebrities, you won't get that in this book. There is a part where on page 185, you do get a little hint. Once he had turned famous, he says, "Single, healthy, honest, and eligible. I enjoyed the transience of a high-class hotel that promoted mischief. Transactions," what kind of transactions? "Flings, affairs, renting to rent, not to own. I took a lot of showers in the daylight hours, rarely alone. I partook." Yeah, so that's about as juicy as you're gonna get in terms of salacious details. Notice how he says he's single, healthy, and honest. So I mean, this is his bias in terms of saying that, but we can only guess what kind of transactions and flings and affairs he had at the height of his fame. And I think he was staying in a Hollywood hotel, a very famous Hollywood hotel at the time. So there aren't going to be any more details about that kind of stuff in this book, and I actually respect him for that. I would say this book is more highlighting the deeply important events to him, and they include, you know, deaths and moments of success and meeting his wife and the birth of his children and coming into alignment and being courageous. And it struck me, as someone as famous as Matthew McConaughey, you would think that, you know, his autobiography would be about his wealth and his fame and his power and women, but it's actually not. It's about the things in life that mean the most to all of us, and I think that's where we can find common ground. And I think that I respect that he was honest about that and vulnerable, and showing us that at the end of the day, those things are what matters the most. Connections with people and trusting your gut and being in alignment with who you truly are is the most important thing, and that's what he writes about in his book. So one part I wanted to highlight is he has a dream that he's in the Amazon River, and there's all these hands touching him, and there's all these animals, and you know, being Matthew McConaughey, having the privilege and the money, he actually makes a trip to the Amazon River and floats in it himself. And there's this beautiful scene on page 157, and it says, walking along a muddy path, I turned a corner, and there in the middle of the trail was a mirage of the most magnificent pinks and blues and red colors I had ever seen. It was electric, glowing, and vibrant, hovering just above the jungle floor, pulsing as if it were plugged into some neon-charged power plant. The jungle floor in front of me was actually a kaleidoscope of thousands of butterflies. It was spectacular. Captivated, I heard this little voice inside my head saying these words, "All I want is what I can see. All I can see is in front of me." And he just talks about that moment, takes away his anxiety, and sort of, he had been living like that Hollywood lifestyle, and his father had passed away, and he didn't have a sense of direction, and then that voice tells him that this moment is all that matters, and just like be in alignment, like follow your gut. And I think that's very powerful, and that's a really beautiful scene, as he followed his dream to the Amazon and had this beautiful experience. So that was a really powerful scene in the book. Like I said, he does share his poetry, and there are some really neat pieces in here. There's a poem called Cool on page 106, and it says, "Cool is a natural law. If it was cool for that time, then it is cool for all time. A fad is just a branch on Cool's trunk, a fashionable fling whose 15 minutes can never abide. No matter how long she tends to try, Cool stands the test of time because Cool never tries. Cool just is." And I think that is kind of how he aims to live his life, to be cool and not a fad. And it says, just to be who you really are. And that, I like that poem. There's some remarkable parts of his life. So even at the height of his fame, he chose to live in a trailer with his dog, Mrs. Hudd, and drive all over the States, kind of like a nomad, as he was filming each of his movies. And I thought that was really interesting because he could have chosen to live in a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, but he chose to live in a trailer with his dog, which shows kind of who he really is. He's not, when you take away all the fame and the lights and the glamour, he's a totally normal guy who wanted to live in a trailer with his dog. Something else I really respected was he kind of got stuck in the romantic comedy niche role, and he wanted to break out of it because it no longer served him as an actor. And so he turned down roles for 2 years because he kept getting romantic comedy lead scripts. And he actually talks about how one studio kept offering him more and more and more money to play a particular role in romantic comedy, and he actually got up to $15 million. And he had a brand new baby and a new wife, but he still had the integrity to turn it down and wait 2 years until he got the script for the Dallas Buyers Club, where he plays the man who's dying of HIV. And for that role, he talks about how he ate just egg whites and lean meats and veggies and all the wine he could drink, which is really interesting, and lost 50 pounds, like was just bone, to play that role. And all of his hard work and integrity paid off because he actually ends up winning, several prestigious awards, including the Oscar for the Dallas Buyers Club. And I think that really shows that if you have the courage to wait for the right moment, the thing that really serves who you truly are, it does pay off. And you could say, yes, he had the financial means to wait 2 years to not work till he found the right thing. But I think we could all be more true to who we really are and cut away the things that don't serve us anymore, which I thought was really powerful. And he has a poem in here called Success, and it comes in the same chapter as when he's talking about turning down those roles. It's on page 256. It says, define success for yourself. We all want to succeed. The question we need to ask ourselves is, what is success to us? More money? Okay. A healthy family, a happy marriage, helping others, to be famous, spiritually sound, to express ourselves, to create art. What is success to me? Continue to ask yourself that question. How are you prosperous? What is your relevance? Your answer may change over time, and that's fine. But do yourself this favor. Whatever your answer is, don't choose anything that will jeopardize your soul. Prioritize who you are, who you want to be, and don't spend time with anything that antagonizes your character. Don't depend on drinking the Kool-Aid. It's popular, it tastes sweet today, but it will give you cavities tomorrow. Life is not a popularity contest. Be brave, take the hill, but first answer the question, what is my hill? And that was defined success. And so it's not really a poem, it's more like a journal entry. But I thought those were really powerful words, and I think that kind of is the heart of the book. And then, of course, when he meets his wife, it's very romantic. He calls her a floating mermaid, and he talks about how he reached his mid-30s and he was ready to settle down and find a wife, and he dated a lot of women, but it wasn't flowing, and he decided to just stop trying to get something and just sit and let it come to him. And it sounds really woo-woo, but it actually does work. It's worked in my life, and it worked for him. And he says here on page 225, he has a dream about that he has 88 children, and it says, the vision of being a lifelong bachelor had come to me in a green light dream. It was a spiritual sign, a message to surrender, to quit trying so intentionally to find the perfect woman. So I quit looking for her, and then she came. And he says here in a poem, the arrow doesn't seek the target draws the arrow. The spider waits in his web for dinner to come. That's a little cliche, but I think it's really true. And he finishes it with saying, "Our souls are infinitely magnetic." And he talks about he was at the Hyde Club on Sunset Boulevard, and he saw her in a soft silk turquoise dress, and she was defying gravity. It's all very romantic. She was floating in the air, it seemed, and he tried to wave over at her, you know, being famous, and she kind of, and then he thought to himself, she's not the kind of woman I can like wave at. So he actually went over like a gentleman and said, "Would you like to come and join me?" And she did, and they chatted, and then he asked her to come back to his house, and she said, "No, but you can walk me to my car." But as chance would have it, her car was towed, and so and then no taxis were coming, so she actually did end up coming back to his place, and he did try and get with her, but she turned him down twice that same night, and he respected her for that. And he said from that point on, he just knew she was the one, and they've been together ever since. So it's all very romantic. So yeah, this book's called Greenlights, and definitely has that kind of Great Gatsby symbolism of that green light. But for him, a green light is more signs along the way that he's on the right path. He's doing the right things, like his dream, for example. But definitely, I kind of got that Great Gatsby vibe. But you know, Gatsby was searching for that green light, and Daisy, an obsession. But for him, it's more like a good thing, driving him forward. So I would say if you're looking for a really good beach read this summer, I highly recommend this. If you're someone who believes in God or following the universe or being in alignment with your true self, if you're kind of on that path, this book will reaffirm that to you. And if you're, you know, in the Hollywood industry and you're kind of jaded by tell-all books, this will be surprisingly refreshing. So I do recommend this book if you haven't read it. So Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey. Check it out when you get a moment. So I hope you've enjoyed my book review, and we'll catch you another time. Take care.